Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. We still have some people getting seated, but I want to go ahead and get started. All right. Thank you so much for being here. All right, who's still talking? Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here for our final keynote panel presentation of Design ADAC, our spring market. We hope you've enjoyed the week. I am not really allowed to say which events are my favorite because it's like your children, they're all your favorite. But I do have to say this one is very special to me today. Not only because I'm so excited to get Beth's brand new book, which is beautiful, but I have known Jeremy for over 20 years and have always wanted to have him on a panel. And I am blessed and honored that Brandon Ingram was the architect on my personal home. So this is really going to be a special treat today. Before I turn things over to this amazing panel, I do want to remind everybody that in this book, we do have a list of all of our new showrooms. We hope you've had a chance to see those this week. You still got a little bit of time left today, couple of events left this afternoon, and then, of course, we have a look back at our winners and the gala from our Southeast Designers and Architect of the Year Awards last year. And then tonight, remember that we will award the Architect, Residential Designer, and Contract Designer for 2025 at the gala this evening. So look out for those winners. We'll post all that on social media and put the news out tomorrow. Speaking of social media, we hope that you've had lots of opportunities to take photos and put them on social media. Use our hashtag DesignADAC, our handle at ADAC Atlanta. And again, all of the speakers, showroom sponsors, and media partners handles are in this event guide. So tag everybody, we'll reshare, we'll show how much fun we're having at DesignADAC this week. I want to thank Kim Regas with Regas Interiors for the stage decor this time. All of the product, of course, came from ADAC. And if you're interested in anything on stage, see the resource list so you can find it in the showrooms. And I want to say a final thank you to our sponsors. Our showroom sponsor today is our brand new showroom, Samuel & Sons in Suite 311. It is an absolute beauty designed by Timothy Corrigan. So we're excited to go up to Suite 311 after this presentation, where we will have a chance to be with our finalists and, of course, Beth with her book signing. And then our media partner today is, of course, Atlanta Homes and Lifestyles. There's magazines here, so pick up the latest issue. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Editor-in-Chief Lauren Iverson.
All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Whoa, I love the response. Okay. Thanks for joining us this afternoon as we close up the keynote discussions for Design ADAC. We're so excited to be having a really lively conversation with everyone here today. Now, I see a lot of familiar faces, but I'm really excited to see a lot of new ones. So welcome to everybody. We have a masterclass in store for you with some really invaluable information from our three Best in Show panelists, who I know need no introductions, but I love any excuse to be able to dote on them a little bit. So we're going to start here with Brandon Ingram. Brandon was influenced at an early age by the work of our region's architectural masters and went on to found his coveted architecture studio in 2012. Following suit of those before him, he's perfected the ability to create architecture that is unique and of its time, while also being respectful of the traditional architecture of the past. So his work is celebrated near and far. He's won countless awards, been published numerous times, and he's a case study of design excellence for sure. So welcome, Brandon.
Thank you.
Next, great. Next, we have Beth Webb. Now, Beth is an internationally acclaimed interior designer with more than 2 decades of experience. Her designs are richly textured and effortlessly elegant, creating spaces that feel deeply personal to all of those who inhabit them. Now, she's certainly mastered the mix as well, blending old and new to carefully curate homes that really live well forever, which is exactly what we'll be talking about today. So her fine-tuned style is on full display, like Katie said, in her new book, Embracing Beauty, which she will be signing in Samuel & Sons after the panel. So make sure you pick up a copy and bring that over and chat with Beth afterwards. So welcome, Beth. And then... Last but never least, we have Jeremy Smearman. Jeremy is our landscape architect on the panel who his work transcends regions, having gotten a degree in North Carolina before working on Nantucket for some prestigious landscape design firms there, which is what actually ignited his passion for fine residential garden design. So he founded his firm Planters in 1988 and has since opened offices in Highlands, in North Carolina, and his garden designs are graceful yet dignified, detailed, and transportive. So welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you.
No, it's not often that we get 3 different categories of design professionals on one panel, so this is truly a treat for us. So thank you guys for being here. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. So today we're talking all about classic design and, creating that time-tested home that really transcends trends and other variable factors. And I know I'm probably biased, but I feel like Atlanta is the South's nucleus of the classic home, thanks to, of course, design professionals of today, like yourself, but of yesteryears and times past. So to start off, when you walk into a home or onto a property, what about it, what elements are there that say this is a classic, timeless home? Brandon, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I think, from an architectural perspective, the things that make a house, a property, a building, classic and timeless really are the same things that have made buildings that way for centuries and centuries and centuries. It's proportion, it's scale, it's authenticity, it's appropriate materials, and it's more often than not, it's restraint. It's doing less, doing more with less instead of less with more. I think that's sort of the from an architectural perspective, what makes a house really timeless if you strip it down to core elements: proportion,
Absolutely.
scale, materiality.
Absolutely. Beth, what about for the interiors? What's telling you this is classic?
Really and truly, it's the same thing. It's scale, it's proportion, it's the golden mean, and it's actually the connoisseurship of materials. Great millwork, plaster walls, gorgeous cabinetry. It's all. I always say it has great bones. When I see that house, and I fall in love with that house, all the Schutzies, the Jimmy Means, the Neil Reeds, great scale, great proportion, and great details.
Absolutely. Now, from a landscape perspective, Jeremy, what does that look like? These classic landscapes. What do you see?
Well, it starts with the setting. Does the house sit comfortably on the land? Does it have a good relationship with its environment? Does it have scale and proportion? Are the spaces around the house, does the house breathe a bit? To Brandon's point, is less is more. Is it overwrought or not? But I think also the materials, if the materials are complementary to the architecture, as they should be, are we extending that out into the environment? That all of those things conspire to make a classic and timeless design. I think it also would have patina, some age.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, you say materials, and that's actually something, that's of course, really important to creating these houses. And I feel like the common thread between the classic homes that you see is this air of effortless elegance. However, for the design professionals who are creating these spaces, there's tangible and complex elements that you guys are implementing to make sure that they have that, air of ease to them when people walk in. So what kinds of materials or specific elements are you implementing into these homes, maybe even specifically new builds, to make them feel like they've been there forever? Beth, do you want to start maybe with the design?
Well, you actually published one of those projects for us, and it was called, the title of the article was called The New Old House. And to this day, people think it's been there for decades, and it's in fact 13 years old. And it was a project we did with Peter Block, and the materiality, the choices were incredibly important. The antique beams, the plaster walls, we just redid it again this year, and because the client had had a sort of windfall. Right. A fortunate windfall. And when they did it the first time, they had 3 small children and not quite the budget to do exactly what they wanted to do. So we went back in and made it even better were that possible. And, this house in front of you right now, I've done 3 times with Jeremy Smearman.
Yes.
I love it. Brandon, what about you from an architectural standpoint? What kinds of materials or elements are you implementing into these houses?
I think your comment about the actual effort that it takes to make something look effortless. That's real.
Right.
One of my favorite quotes, and I quote her all the time, is Dolly Parton said that it costs a lot of money to look this cheap. And it's really
Dolly.
true.
It's
It's
true.
very true that
that
sometimes, and like I said earlier,
Right.
that element of restraint, that element of going just far enough but not any farther, is elusive. It's very difficult to
It's
get
the
right.
edit.
But that's kind of the gold standard, is knowing when to really covet that
Right.
reserved attitude. And so for us, I think it goes back to not to keep beating the drum on scale and proportions, but materiality, on materials that are honest, that are true, that are not trying to be something they're not, that are not fake or imitation. It's just being true to the things that we use to excuse me, to build our houses. Just being
Right.
true to what are the materials that are time tested,
Right.
that have been around forever.
And that's honestly where you see a lot of the skimping go on.
For sure.
And that's where the house misses.
For sure.
You know, I actually recently saw in an article that we had published that the builder had intentionally placed the roof tiles, some of them higher than others, to make it look like it had been there for
sure.
much longer. And so it's interesting, all of the, like you said, the complexities and the efforts that go into these houses to make them look.
Well,
like
sometimes
they've been there.
just embracing imperfection.
Absolutely.
Telling a
Perfectly
mason, for
imperfect.
instance, perfectly imperfect. Telling a mason or a
We do that
or a
even
carpenter.
with plant material.
Right.
We buy trees that are less than perfect. We want them to be healthy, but we want them to be unsheared so that they look like they've been grown in nature for a while. They're not straight out of a nursery.
Yeah,
That's so
It's
interesting.
patina and character.
that's right.
Right.
We live in a world where AI can make anything look completely perfect, but there's
Haven't
something,
we learned? Yeah.
And you can actually tell.
Yeah.
and you can tell. But what we have is the ability to make things not perfect.
And that's reality too. That's what it should be.
That's
Just embracing
being a
that
human,
perfection,
right?
like
Our
you said.
houses are really real.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They age, they have warts, they have pimples.
People live in them.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Now, we're kind of talking about that a little bit, piggybacking off that, how times and trends can change, but a well-done classic home really should transcend all of that. But that said, things evolve a little bit over time. So how would you say today in 2025 is different than, let's say, 2015, 2010 in terms of the classic home? And have you seen any subtle changes in traditional taste over the years, or raising asks from your clients that are becoming more popular?
I think it's function. I mean, predominantly, I don't think there's that much difference between, I had to think what I was doing in 2015. But I think it is more function than anything else. I mean, classic is classic, traditional is traditional, timeless is timeless, but the functions tend to change. I mean, I looked at a house a few months ago, and it had not sold well, and the reason it hadn't, I mean, the reason it had been on the market for a long time was the fact that the younger buyer would want the playroom that didn't exist in this 1920 house. There were elements where people wanted a master on the main that did not exist in this house, and there was actually, because of the setback, no way to put the master on the main. So that's the difference I see. I think that forever's forever, but I do think that the functions are going to change.
Yeah. I don't know about you guys, but 15 years ago, I was in diapers.
I
but-
know you are.
No, I think the function is exactly right. And what we're slowly starting to see is, we've gone through the era of everybody's got to have lockers for their kids, and everybody's got to have a place for the dog kennels, and so that changes almost cyclically.
Yeah.
But it seems like lately we're seeing, maybe we're on the cusp of something where people are actually stripping all of that.
Yes.
And there was a long period of time, hundreds and hundreds of years, where we didn't have places for kids' book bags, and we didn't have places for
Hundreds.
laptops, and we didn't have places for
Charging stations.
charging. And so people are kind of embracing, not just making things look like they were old, but actually living like we live in old houses. We
Well,
don't have to disguise a drop zone as if it was something old. There's no precedent.
It's the idea
for
of
a drop zone.
generous, well-proportioned spaces.
Correct.
That can be multi-purpose.
Right.
Instead of designing
room.
a garden room for this kind of function, how about just an open, flat lawn that kids can play on, you can entertain on, it serves a variety of purposes. And so stylistically, it's this editing where we're kind of maybe going back to functionality and stripping away some layers, which is frankly refreshing to see.
That's right. I always like to think, just as an example, what would it look like if a family in 2025 were to bring a moving truck into the Swan House? Like, could you actually live in that house? And I think you'd probably be surprised at how well that house would live for a young family. Maybe there's not TVs in every room, and there's not,
Yeah.
a pool in the
iPad.
back.
I'll be so glad when there's not a TV in every room.
Agreed. But
Or over the
it
fireplace.
just feels like people are starting to embrace that we
Right.
just don't need all the function-specific
Yeah.
spaces, right?
Well, I think that goes back to what you were saying too, just with AI and how technology is advancing so quickly that people are kind of wanting to go back to those simpler ways of living and just enjoying people's company and not having screen time every day and whatever it may be. I know a designer hates to see a TV screen coming.
Hate
so,
to see the TV over the fireplace, but and the smart house has become the dumb house.
right.
Because unless you have a 12-year-old, you're not going to be able to work it.
Yeah, yeah.
Those Gen Zers know what they're doing, I know. I love it. Well, you guys all have projects across the country, and I know a lot of the design professionals in this room also are working all over the country or the world, wherever it may be. So, in your opinion, would you say that there's a difference between the Southern classic home and a home maybe in another region, or is classic just classic? What are some of the differences, and what are some of the similarities that you see in those? Who
Brandon,
wants to kick us off?
you
I
like
would
it?
say, I would say classic is classic to a great extent, but maybe to differentiate Southern classic, there's an underlying formality, but going back to there's an imperfection to it. It's not too perfect. It's not too precious. But classic is classic. The vernacular is the vernacular wherever you are. But I do think that there is a distinct difference to Southern classic, at least from my perspective as it relates to the garden.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's just a dialect. Southern is an accent, and classic is universal. Yes, our houses are a little sweeter. They're a little bit softer. I like to think they have a little more personality in the South. But that's a style that translates anywhere. We're probably, I would say 60% of our work is not in Atlanta, certainly, and we're getting more outside of the South in general. But the things that people love about Southern houses can very easily be applied, worldwide, in some cases, but nationwide for sure. It's again that lovability and that sort of familiarity that I think we do really well in the South that people respond to, and that's where it makes our designs universal, Southern design universal.
Well, and I think as a Southerner, period, I think we care deeply about our homes. I mean, if you look at the Southerner in general, we probably spend more money on our homes. We maintain our homes, and I think better, but
We're nicer.
we're nicer. We have cheese straws and cocktails.
Right.
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 Oh, Beth, you were mentioning earlier about a house in California, I think that you had said. I know you've done a lot of work over there as well. How does that translate in terms of the classic home compared to a Southern
Well, there are
classic
parts of, I think, every city that has, that enclave, and this particular one was in Hancock Park, which is, famous for its beautiful, historic, classic houses. And there was another one in Hillsborough, same thing. California, I always think of as being this wild hodgepodge. You drive down the street, you see contemporary, and you see, Gothic, and you see all these things crammed together. But there are these specific enclaves where classic is the same as it is here. And, I love seeing that in the different cities we get to work in, Greenwich or San Francisco.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a city that you feel may closely replicate what Atlanta has going on in terms of the classic and tailored home? Is there anything?
Birmingham.
Birmingham for sure.
I mean, I think Birmingham has a lot of talent in it, and they really care about their homes.
We have any Birmingham people in the room? Woo!
There you go.
Got a few. You heard it here first. I love that. Well, with each new project, and this is always kind of the touchy subject, I suppose, it does take a village to bring it to life. But while we all dream of free reign and maybe a blank checkbook, budgets and how those are separated between the different designers, whether that's the interiors, the architecture, the landscape, et cetera, can sometimes be challenging to navigate. So in your guys' experience, what advice can you give to the professionals in this room on navigating those budget splits, and how can you work together as a team, I suppose, to make sure that hopefully no one is greatly sacrificing and the project still blends well?
It's communication. It's having a team assembled at the front end of a project, having kind of a singular vision, everybody staying in their sandbox, representing their discipline,
Right.
And presenting to the client. And if there is a reason to pull back on budget, sharing that,
Sure.
you know, across all disciplines to make sure that the finished product is going to be even.
Right.
You know, it's going to read as a cohesive unit, I think, is really important.
Well, I think the acknowledgement that the architecture is made better by the interiors are made better by the landscape's made better by the architecture. We're not islands.
Right.
Everything we do is made better by that collaboration and that effort that's truly joint.
We love a team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the team approach is always the best, and our best projects are those where the team's in place from the beginning.
Always.
And we stay in our lane. When we get to work with great architects and landscape architects, it makes it much easier too. So I don't want to get out of my lane.
Right.
If Brandon's doing
Right.
that interior architecture, I don't want to step in his sandbox.
Absolutely.
And if Jeremy, I'm certainly not going to get involved in the landscape.
But wouldn't you say, Beth, some of the best projects are the ones where you
Or
kind
you
of do step
collaborate.
into our
Well,
sandbox?
or
right?
you're asked to play in the same sandbox.
Right.
That would be the
Well,
operative word.
Because I
think
say it all the time that I feel like when we know, for instance, what you're going to do, if you have a vision for a wallpaper or a paint color or a certain treatment, if we know about it as we're designing the architecture of a room, we can play up to it or play down to it or whatever that case might be. And the same with you, Jeremy. I think if you have garden rooms or spaces in mind, then we can start to mold and
Right.
meld our architecture to
It's very much a
tee it up for you.
collaborative effort.
For sure.
And it's great fun.
And you can bring ideas to one another and say, could you give me this architecturally because I want to execute this?
That's right.
Or I see this.
That's right.
I mean, I did this the other day with the landscape architect. I'm like, we're doing the conservatory. I want to make sure that the floor plays with your exterior terrace.
Right.
And we have to do that dialogue.
Yeah.
So that we make sure we're playing, all our materiality is playing well
Yeah.
together.
Then the bully in the sandbox is the builder.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's the joy kill.
Yeah.
yes.
He's the one that lays down the hammer and tells you what's actually
Right.
going to happen, I'm sure. I love
Adds the
that.
reality to it.
And the
Or the subs, or the husband.
husband.
Or
Or the
sub-
husband.
Or the, yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, now, do you guys ever feel like you're running into that with spouses, I suppose, and your clients, when you're having to navigate these budgets and things like that? Is it more so the architect or the landscaper being like, I need more of this, or the client being like, sorry, you're done, he gets everything?
We're a marriage counselor every day.
Yes, that's,
That's all we really do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
But by
always say-
default, we get everything. The architecture gets everything, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I would say on most projects, there's one half of that couple is more engaged than the other.
Right.
And it's ultimately who's making the financial decisions. Is it the person that's more engaged or not? And if it's not, that's problematic.
But I always say the happiest job, well, the most productive jobs we work on are when the husband and wife stay in their lane. Because if they both care deeply about interiors, it's a train wreck. If they are not thinking along the
Synergized there.
same,
Right.
But when they both care about the HVAC or they both care about the sofa fabric, it's a problem.
Big problem. Sure. All right, well, I want to step outside for a moment. Jeremy, timeless interiors and architecture is one thing, but when you see landscaping, that's through a different lens from what these two, I suppose, are looking through. So in the front yard, you think curb appeal, I'm sure. In the backyard, it may go closer to the amenities and entertaining, perhaps a chicken coop. So how do you tie a landscape together between the front and the back of a home? And what are some plantings maybe that you're planting that feels particularly character rich?
Well, so I think, just to piggyback on how you set it up, the front is you're creating a context for the home, the 35-mile-an-hour view of the house. So you're framing it and creating a setting. Does it sit proudly? Is it somewhat obscured? Is it just a quick little moment, or is it laid bare and it's sitting proudly up there? You're thinking through those kinds of things. It's typically a little bit less detailed. It's a bolder, broader statement, and to create the context for the home from the street side. In the back, you mentioned amenities. It is much more layered. It's much more detailed because for most homes, most classic homes, certainly that's where the owners are going to spend more leisure time. They're going to entertain there. It's going to be part of their daily lives. Typically, architecturally, there's more of a view. The house faces the back more. And so we're going to be much more detailed, much more layered, as I said, and take our time there. And we're going to use the classic materials you asked about. It's going to be, certainly in the South, it's going to be boxwoods, the ubiquitous boxwood. It's a rare project that I don't use them. It's kind of synonymous with the Southern classic home. And so that's certainly a material. There's going to be some element of formality. There's going to be hedges. But how detailed the garden, that's really up to the homeowner. We'll go down that road as we develop the plans.
Right, right. Well, there is a project that's going around in the slideshow that we actually featured, I want to say in 2011, and it still looks so just gorgeous. The one at the chicken coop just passed. That I want to say we featured in 2011, which is really the perfect example of a garden that lives like it's been there forever and still looks just blooming and beautiful for today.
So that was a Jimmy Means house, sitting on a built up out of a floodplain, very classic Virginian. It was actually a cross between two famous Virginia plantations. And the gardens had been developed for a prior owner, and we took it over for a new owner with a very, very different program. And so we had wide open spaces, but the house kind of, as dramatic as the house is from the front, the back was equally squished next to a creek. And so we didn't have generous spaces. So the gardens, we had to come forward and around the house to create, to honor the program that they developed. And because it was kind of a farmette, if you will.
Yep.
Well, that's 10 acres. So the idea, they wanted to raise horses, they wanted to raise chickens. There was talk of sheep, and so how to integrate
Why
that?
not?
Yeah, why not? Why not?
This one here,
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
So we had the space to allow it to breathe, but we needed to again kind of parcel out some land, create the pastures for the livestock, and then create garden rooms, which was done with all the hedges and the famous serpentine wall that was a copy of Jefferson's wall at UVA, and actually some of the bricks in that wall came from trustees at the University of Virginia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, when you're doing these landscapes too, kind of back to that original thought in the back, what are some of these asks that you're seeing from your clients that people are really wanting these days with their landscaping?
Well, I think a lot of it, because we're such an image-driven society now, a lot of it is, I want this. And it is the Pinterest page, it is this photo. And my first reaction is, okay, let's talk about that image, because that represents a moment in time. And unlike their mediums, mine ebbs and flows. It is perishable, it is constantly changing. And so I can mimic that image, I can give you that, but is that really the right look for the property throughout?
Right.
Invariably, it's a picture that was taken mid-May. So let's talk about what that looks like in February. And does that make some sense? And so,
Is it hardy for Zone 5?
yes. Does that actually even grow here? And we have to pass it through the filter of, I can give you a better substitute, something that will do better.
Right.
So.
Amazing. Well, moving inside, Beth, I read this article recently where you had loosely said something along the lines of texture is your favorite color.
Well, it's because I'm so known for neutrals, and of course I do color all the time. It's just it doesn't look so good when we do the art layout for the book. So
Right.
People don't know that about us, but we do color and a lot of it. But I tend to be going back to the edit. I am a stickler on sort of that timeless interior. It costs a lot of money to do your house,
Right.
and I want it to live a long time. So with every design schematic I do, I'm looking at the longevity. And because I have plenty of clients who want a trend that I have to explain to them why they don't want a chartreuse kitchen. And, so those are that's my thinking all the way through the process. I'm like, how will this live on? I don't want to look at my own work and say that's so 2020, or that's so, I mean, that to me is not interesting. So texture is my color in a neutral interior that we are well known for. And in order to make it interesting and not bland and look like a hotel room, I vary the textures. It takes a deft hand, and it's sort of a very complicated thing that I have to explain to my office often. That, you know, if you have a velvet next to a silk burlap or whatever, it's how do these play together? It's just like me playing with the architect and their palettes. I'm playing with texture as my palette.
Right, right. And so when you're going about this design process, then where are you starting and how are you building upon that? Is it with the fabrics? Is it with the shape of the furnitures? Is it you're finding a really great accessory that you want to build a space around? Or is it a little bit of everything?
It's a little bit of everything. I mean, it all depends on what they're coming to the table with. If I've got a blank canvas and it's an empty house and the client's not coming with anything, that's a different conversation, and we start with the furniture plan and then we go from there. And I always equate it to the domino effect.
Yeah.
I do like the collaboration with the client, so it's not I'm not cookie cutter for a reason. I'm not living in these houses, and I want it to be a reflection of my client. I want it to be a reflection of who lives in that house. And so if they have an extraordinary collection of art or, you know, antiques or whatever, sometimes there's a jumping off point. Oftentimes there's not. So we do a lot of new build. We do a lot of houses with nothing in it. So it's kind of a variable factor.
Definitely. Well, Brandon, you're on the hot seat
Hey,
next.
let's go.
I know. So you are this expert in classicism and traditional design. And so if a client comes to you and they're like, I want a house that is similar to the likes of the Neil Reeds, the Jimmy Means, the Philip Schutzes, what does that look like for today? And what kinds of changes are you making for a home like that?
Well, I think one of the things that those people, Schutzey, Reed, Jimmy Means, and there's countless others whose names we could use. One of the things that they always got right is they really studied precedent. If Schutzey was going to do a house that was going to feel Italian, then you better believe that he had studied every Italian precedent out there, or Reed's famous Georgian houses. So I think that's really the route that we like to take projects is let's hear what you like, let's hear kind of your vision, and let's look at how these have been done historically and how they've been done well historically. And let's really get to know a style. And then let's make it your style. Let's kind of take the edge off of it a little bit. There's a way to do a very academic feeling Georgian house, for instance. And there's a way to do a Southern Georgian house. There's a way to do a New England Georgian house. So let's kind of filter it and let's make it, you know, I personally love houses that feel a little bit naive, a little bit innocent, where they're not so perfect and so crisp. And that's a lot of times what makes a house feel like it belongs to an individual person. You know, getting to know, you know, we talk about Pinterest pages and Instagram images and the godforsaken Howells images, whatever that was
Always
for a
bad
minute.
images.
But you have to, after a while, you kind of interpret a common thread of what people like. And so many times people don't know the difference, and it's not a fault of any clients, but they don't know the difference in really good and just average. But once they see it,
They see mostly average.
they see mostly average. But once you can say, all right, this is kind of average, but if we just did X, Y, and Z, and we just changed this proportion, we use this material instead of that material, it kind of, they lighten up, and they get it. I mean, I think you'd agree that a lot of what we do is teaching too. We're therapists for sure, but
Yeah.
we're educators.
We're teachers. Yeah.
We're teaching people what they really like.
Right.
And what is that common thread in those Instagram pictures or Pinterest pictures?
And actually sort of creating a lifestyle too.
Sure.
Certainly. And I'm sure it's similar, you know, for the design and the landscape for the greats and the icons that have come and gone in the past, the same process that you guys have too with the designs there, kind of tailoring it for the person, like, okay, you love this style, but is this truly what you are wanting and looking for? It's not a copy and paste job.
It's definitely not copy and paste.
There's no
Right.
copying and pasting.
Right. I love it.
One of my favorite Schutzey stories is that Schutzey had an office in the Candler building downstairs, and he had a client, I think it was actually the client that built the Pink Palace at the corner of Tuxedo and Paces Ferry, who brought her all these images of English Tudor houses that she liked, or brought Schutzey these images, and he flipped through the notebook and listened to her. And the story says he literally opened his window and threw the notebook out and said, now, let's design your house. And as luck would have it, she didn't get the English Tudor house. She got that Italianate
Wow.
Venetian palace. But that's kind of what we have to do. We listen, we filter, and then we
Synthesize.
prescribe what the patient
Interpret.
actually needs.
And then there's no notebook throwing after that.
We don't we just delete the Pinterest.
Yeah.
We don't throw the notebook
Thank you.
anymore.
It's much
Yeah.
easier these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, I am going off script a little bit right now, but there is a project that you mentioned in the slideshow that's towards the beginning that Jeremy and you, Beth, have actually worked on 3 separate times over the last however many years for 3 separate families, I believe.
Yep.
I would love to talk more about that and just, how did you keep a tunnel vision to make this home feel like it's new for each family that you're working with when you're already so familiar with the bones of the home? What did that look like?
You want to go first?
Well, I think obviously it starts with the client. I think when was the first version? It was early
Yeah,
2000s.
That's when my corgis were conceived in the backyard.
Okay. Early 2000s.
It's true.
We're gonna get on that too. We gotta know more about that.
So the first iteration was a classic home, but for an older couple who traveled frequently
And married later to mine.
and married later in life. So it was a very different program.
And he had
This
a
is
lot of
part of
stuff.
the.
Pardon?
He had a lot of stuff. She had nothing. He had a
That's
lot
true.
of antiques.
That's true. Well, that was interior.
Yeah.
From the exterior program was fairly simple. It was just clean and classic. It needed to look like it belonged on Haversham Road. But then very shortly after it was done, they sold it to a much younger couple who was very active, had children. He swam laps every day. They didn't have a pool.
European.
He was European. He was very
Opinionated.
very opinionated, and I wouldn't say cheap.
Yes,
Say-
he was.
Parsimonious would be a better word. But he had an aversion to the sun, so he wanted a pool that
Yeah.
had an awning that stretched all the way over his pool.
Oh my goodness.
Fortunately, he was CEO of an awning company,
Yes.
so we had a custom design awning that stretched over the
It's
pool.
making more sense.
Yeah. So we were reimagining it for a completely different lifestyle, completely different family.
Right.
Within the bones of all of our stuff, of course, was exterior. And fortunately, we had the space to do it because the first iteration was so much smaller in scope. And so the second go-round was a much bigger, broader iteration. And then the third there was an intervening client that had taken the house and done nothing to it for a number of years. So it was frankly in bad
was
shape.
bad shape.
Bad shape. And the landscape was certainly in decline. So the final iteration, which stands today, is just putting it back, better version of itself, for a client that was much like the first client, older, traveled frequently, so it's not a permanent
This
home.
was really their second home because their primary residence is in
Florida.
Beach, yeah.
Yeah. So, it was fun. It was an interesting study because obviously she knew the house, I knew the property very, very well, but you're looking at it through a different filter, a different lens, because you're
in a
working
way different budget.
in a way. Well, yes. Yes, budget 3 was much better than budget
Way
1 or
better.
2.
Yeah.
Much easier.
Right. Now, Beth, how does that translate to the interiors of this house in specific?
Well, when I first met the house, and she is a grand dame, built in 1920,
Yeah.
and gorgeous proportions, really great materiality, and honestly, no one changed the kitchen. In all of those iterations, the kitchen is still the same.
Is it really?
Yeah, we upgraded appliances, but we left the sort of quaint cabinetry and everything that was still intrinsic. That fireplace, we left that too. And
Shows you how often I get inside.
you don't get inside. You can look through the window. You did the terrace, but anyway. So with the first client, I sort of came into it. They were in it. It pre-existed. We were doing another property for them at the time. We were doing their house in Sea Island
Yeah.
that you were on too. So with that, it was minor sort of tweaks, not a lot of decorating. But then with the second client, he bought it. She never saw it. He bought it, literally. He came to
right.
Atlanta. She was in Europe. She never saw the house. He moved the kids and her into the house, and they added a foyer with key summer hour. They added a playroom upstairs for the children and a sort of attic space. They added the pool house.
Yep.
And then we went on to do their Greenwich house when they left Atlanta.
It's truly the gift that keeps on
Keeps on
giving.
giving.
Because it led to a project in Greenwich for us,
Yeah.
projects in Sea Island,
Yeah.
and we,
Here's the gardens of that.
yeah, we service those clients today.
And with
Still.
the last iteration, with our final client, they gave me sort of parameters, and the photos are here too. That's it.
it.
So they wanted it to restore it to its original glory, and we did. And they spared no expense, and they spared no expense on the renovation. They spared no expense on the furnishings. And I always say I can only be as good as my clients let me be, but they were ideal dream clients, the nicest people I've ever known, with a very large pocketbook.
And actually, side note, I've actually done it 4 times, because no sooner did we do it the 3rd time for this latest client, then we had that extremely hard freeze in winter,
Yes.
and almost
I
everything.
never shot it after that.
Yes, almost everything had just gone in, so it was not established. So we had a tremendous amount of winter kill, and they didn't blink an eye and said, please do it again.
Oh, my goodness.
So we did, yeah.
Wow.
So it is still there.
She is.
She is.
He passed
recently
away.
passed away,
In the last 2 months.
yeah.
Well, the house will live on.
Yes.
Now, Beth, you have to tell us about these corgis.
Oh, the
quickly.
corgis. Well, the first owner had 3 corgis at the time, and I was dating someone who had a corgi, who wanted to breed his corgi. So we introduced the corgis, and then they had
And
a
as
date at the
corgis will
house.
do,
They had a date at the house, and we had puppies.
You're a woman of many talents. I love it. Now, Brandon, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here too, but have you ever had an experience where you have had to go into a project you've already been in before, and how do you look at that through an architectural lens to really give it a fresh perspective, even though you know the house?
Yeah, we've done that a couple of times, but I think probably the best opportunity, the best experience I can share along those lines is when we renovate really well-done historic houses. You guys kind of got a crash course in this in a matter of 10 years, 12 years. But a really great
longer.
house with a great lineage and a great heritage has a history of previous owners and previous architects and previous interior designers. So I think to really do those properly, you have to get to know what was done, what was undone, how the house evolved, and really put yourself as a part of that narrative. We're parts of the stories of these old houses, for better or worse. And everybody that's ever touched is also part of that story. So you have either the avenue you can take where you're going to, like your client did, restore it all back to its original glory, or you make yourself part of that story and you honor that at one point this client added on this awkward little sunroom, and we're going to deal with it and celebrate it, and we're going to do our thing. Or, you know, and that's kind of part of doing a house justice, I think, is respecting that it is not a one-and-done thing. Houses evolve, houses change, and I think being a part of that story over a really long course of time is really what's rewarding about renovating or working on a historic house.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, hopefully our people in the audience can get some sound advice from that. But Beth, that project that you were referencing, that you've worked on with Jeremy 3 times, I believe is in your new book,
It
right?
is.
It is. So let's touch on the book a little bit. I'm gonna have you do a little shameless plug for yourself. This is your second book that you've published, I believe. Tell us a little bit about what the audience here can expect in your second.
Well, the first book was very fast-tracked, and I have a book agent in New York that some of us in the audience share. And when she sort of said, let's do this thing, you're ready, I had a lot that I'd already shot. For editorial, there was quite a bit that had already been in Atlanta Homes and Lifestyles, but they fast-tracked it, so I didn't have time to think or blink. We didn't shoot much for the book. It was all sort of pre-baked. We're not shooting deep. So when I say shooting deep, normally with editorial, you get 2 days maybe to shoot a project. And with this book, we shot for 5 days. We shot for 7 days. We shot for whatever we needed to get the meat. I love a vignette. I love to do the tiny details. And I think that that's the soul of the house. And so And not only that, the point of the first book is actually better clients, and that came with the first book. So in the second book, the projects are more layered, they're more sophisticated, they have bigger budgets. And I also was told to wait. And, Jill said to me, if you want things in the book, we can delay this. I mean, we were coming out of COVID, there was a huge backlog of books being published. So it gave me the time to really think about what I wanted in the book, gave me time to sort of shoot deeply, and it just turned out to be, I think, a lot more layered than the first.
Right, absolutely. Well,
Hope
like
you
I
all
said,
buy one.
Yeah, everyone buy one. I have a copy, it's amazing. Now, I want to make sure that we have time for a few questions at the end, so I'm going to leave it on this. Or in your opinion, and from each of your respective fields, if there is one small thing that people could implement into their homes or into their landscapes that is going to make a noticeable difference in creating a more timeless classic feel, what may that be? Who wants to kick it off?
This is a layup for me. Plant a tree, plant an oak, plant a legacy tree, plant something for the next generation. Don't plant it too close to the house, don't plant it where it's going to get cut down, but plant for the next generation.
Yeah.
Perfect. Beth, Brandon?
I think connoisseurship for me. I mean, I've recently been involved in developing art collections for my clients. That's my background. It's what I came from. It's what I love. And honestly, when I see clients, so often they will stop at a start. It's so hard to get people to finish because we were just having a therapy session before you all got here about sort of being the driveway man and where the money stops. And so for us, it's getting the client to do that last layer. It's very painful. I now use the book as a bribe. And because when they say, we want our project in your next book, I'm like, then you're going to have to finish it.
Brandon?
I would say it's don't focus on the big things, get the little things right, get the small details right. And I'd say go to your nearest bookstore and buy the book, Get Your House Right. Do you know the book?
No.
You should have the book.
I'm going to go get it.
Get Your House Right and study it like the Bible and proceed to get your house right with little corrections and nuances of appropriateness.
Amazing.
And then hire a good design team
Of course.
to make them happen.
Make that one in bold, please. Okay, does anyone have any questions for our panelists? We've got mics for you if yes. Don't be shy, it's not scary.
Do we have a quiet crowd today?
Oh, we've got a
there we go.
couple over here.
I have a question about boxwood blight
Oh.
in Atlanta.
Okay?
Love boxwoods, but blight, it seems to be everywhere. How are you dealing with that?
Well, for a long time, we stopped planting boxwoods, but we're back to planting them now. Not that blight has gone away, we just understand it better, and suppliers are more tightly controlled to make sure that the boxwoods that they sell don't have blight. But by understanding it, I could spend an hour and bore all of you to death, but basically boxwood blight always travels with two or three other pathogens, two or three other fungal pathogens, which are treatable. So we can treat those and keep the likelihood of blight down. It's taken years for scientists to figure that out. Still no control for the blight itself, but if you can kill its friends, you can keep it in check, and we understand the cultural conditions now to kind of prevent boxwoods from getting blight or reduce that likelihood. However, if your next door neighbor doesn't know any of this or doesn't care about any of this, it's a fool's errand to try. So we're very selective about where we plant boxwoods, where we get our boxwoods, and how we treat them.
I think there was another question. Did
I think
someone-
on that row, was there another question?
My question is in reference to redoing a house again and again. Is that something you enjoy because like if a client comes to you for a house or interior design that you've already done, do you enjoy that because you're familiar with the space, or if you're trying to do a timeless design, is it a bit, not offensive, but you're trying to create something that's everlasting? But I guess they've come back to you, so is it also they're enjoying your design, they just want to update it or have a new style?
Well, truth be told, it gives you an opportunity to correct your own mistakes, and I think
True.
it's
Very true.
I think there's
actually true.
value in looking back at your own work critically to see what worked, what didn't, and how do I make it better. So I find it fun.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's a challenge. I don't find it monotonous at all.
Agreed, and I think ultimately we're all in service to our clients. Whatever their needs are become our needs, and we have to respond
We
to
are the
them. And
help.
we are the help. That's right. And so if they see something that they want to change, then we
That's a
help
book
them
title
change
for
it.
next
We
time.
are the help.
We are the help.
Amazing. Any other questions? Got one.
You talked about how Atlanta is a hub for great design. I would love to know if y'all have any favorite famous Atlanta buildings or residents that truly embody classic and timeless design in y'all's opinion.
How much time do we have?
I know,
to talk about
a
this?
lot.
Pick your top.
I mean, for me, it's pretty much any Jimmy Means house.
Yeah.
He kind of hit it out of the park every time. If I had to pick a favorite, well, if I had to pick two favorite, it's the Nixon house, which is just to the right of Swan House, the big white Georgian.
love that
It was Neil
house.
Reed's very last house, and he died while it was under construction. One of my favorite houses, and also the Neil Reed at the corner of Cherokee and Andrews. Two of my very favorites in Atlanta, but there are about 400 of them I could name. But
I've always loved the Eagle House,
Yeah.
one of my all-time favorites.
fascinating scale in that
Yeah,
house.
love that house.
Okay, Jeremy.
Drive down Habersham, drive down Valley, drive down Cherokee, and look to your left, look to your right.
Yeah.
Easy peasy. All right. Well, thank you all for being here, and thank you for everyone who's joined us. That's going to be it.